Good afternoon. Let's talk business now. We are doing it live right here, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. We get right down to business with the news-driven hour right after Ben Shapiro and just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money, live on the air right here on 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com and your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. What a week. Major averages today closing lower despite the brief bounce we saw yesterday following the washout on Monday in which the Dow closed down more than 1,000 points. Today we're down another 234 points. The S&P 500 gave back 40.5, and the NASDAQ slipped 171 points. Once again, the tech names have come under pressure with NVIDIA, the magnificent one, back below $100 a share now, down more than $5 at the close today to $98.91 a share. It's been the worst five-day start to a month for both the Dow and the S&P 500 since January of 2016, by the way. Rough, certainly, for August so far. We also saw the U.S. court ruling that found Alphabet Google's operates a illegal monopoly over online search as a credit negative for the company, as it might need to change its very profitable business model that might have made it a force in targeted ads, according to Moody's ratings, which said the magnitude of any possible changes is unclear for the time being. Alphabet Google coming under pressure today. Consumers also under pressure, increasing the amount of credit they used in June at a bit of a slower rate and a sign of rising financial stress on U.S. households. According to Wall Street Journal forecasts, consumer credit rose by a modest $8.9 billion in June. How's that for a credit card bill? According to the Federal Reserve, economists had expected a nearly $10 billion increase. J.P. Morgan Chase's chief executive, Jamie Dimon, the head of the largest bank in the United States, said the market plunged this week and partial recovery in the past week amounted to an overreaction by investors. He added that America is alive and well. The longtime chief executive at J.P. Morgan Chase said that despite the turmoil and some negative data points recently, his outlook for a potential recession remains roughly the same as it was about 6 months ago, at a 35% to 40% chance of a hard landing for the U.S. economy. Intel's been in the spotlight lately. That tech bellwether has really taken a hit. Shares down about 38% over the past 5 trading sessions. And declines of that magnitude, according to MarketWatch, can sometimes prompt upgrades from analysts who see a buying opportunity in the weakness. An underground bunker in Jerusalem where senior leaders can remain for an extended period during a war has been prepared by the Israeli intelligence service and is fully operational. According to reports of the Times of Israel, reporting the bunker reportedly built almost 20 years ago, can sustain hits from a range of existing weaponry, has command and control capabilities, and is connected to the Defense Ministry headquarters in Tel Aviv. We're monitoring the latest developments in the Middle East, with Iran threatening Israel with an attack. I'll discuss the latest in the Middle East crisis with Dan RAVIV, Middle East expert, former network news correspondent, author of books on the Israeli intelligence service, including his latest, Spies Against Armageddon, Inside Israel's Secret Wars. Big news on the homeless front here in California, with San Francisco set to bus more homeless people out of San Francisco, and they're coming to, guess where? Los Angeles, as well as other cities across California. Meanwhile, L.A. County supervisors will not cite or jail the homeless in Los Angeles to clear encampments. I'll discuss the latest with SOLEDAD URSUA, Venice Neighborhood Council board member. She'll be joining me live later this hour. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, the volatility we've seen this week, and the whole works. Joining us live now, GABRIEL Wisdom, money manager and managing director at American Money Management, based here in Southern California, also author of Wisdom on Value Investing. GABRIEL Wisdom, thank you very much for taking the call in this wild week here. Give us your impression of what we've seen this week.
Well, Frank, there's still a wall of worry out there. You might say that it had faded for a time. There was a lot of optimism about everything that could go right, as reflected in the prices of stocks, but that has changed. August is historically a very bad month for stocks anyway. 61% of the time, August is it's not quite a disaster, but it's soft. And markets have, on 61% of the time, have been down anywhere from 3 to 10%. So, and the volatility, as measured by the VIX, the so-called volatility gauge, was the third highest ever on Monday, third highest after the great financial crisis and the COVID panic lows. So this could very well be an overreaction, as Jamie Dimon said, but the seasonals have always been poor for August historically.
On your live with money manager Gabriel Wisdom. It's also an election year, and of course, politics everywhere these days. The Dow plunged more than 1,000 points on Monday, was up nearly 300 yesterday, down more than 200 today. In election years, of course, we haven't seen anything quite like this one. What is your impression about how the market performs at this point in an election year?
You know, Frank, there are a lot of concerns about the political shifts, the economy. Clearly, since the debates, the odds of who will be the new president, where will the political winds blow, that's changed, and it's weighing on the markets as we can see that consumers have been a bit reluctant. Amazon, for example, reported online sales up 4.6% last quarter. That was shy of estimates, and they say they are seeing a cautious consumer out there. It's the effects of a news cycle and the political development specifically, but the general environment, I think, is one of cautiousness. So, now next week we've got retail sales. Home Depot kicks off the retail earnings. That's August 13. And we'll hear from Urban Outfitters, Macy's, Gap, and TJX.
On the air live with Gabriel Wisdom, the Magnificent Seven's taken a big hit lately. NVIDIA today down again. Let's talk about NVIDIA here. I know you followed that one closely, as well as Apple, which Warren Buffett reportedly unloaded about half of his position in Apple, or at least they did at Berkshire Hathaway, which he's the top guy there. Apple moving higher today, by the way. I see here up nearly $3 back to just shy of $2.10. What about those two in the Magnificent Seven space?
Well, first with Apple, for Berkshire Hathaway and for Buffett to own such an outsized position in anyone's stock, to my knowledge, that's never happened in the 70-some-odd years that Warren Buffett's been involved in the markets. And so it was no surprise that he would sell half of the Apple position. Still, he's one of the largest Apple shareholders. And NVIDIA and the other chip names, by the way, have been under a lot of pressure only because they did so well. Now, NVIDIA, it was revealed that their new generation of AI chips is going to be delayed by 3 months. That could have some impact on their biggest customers like Microsoft or Google or Meta. I think it might not be good for Apple either.
All right, what about Intel, the tech bellwether, also getting slammed right now at 18 and change. Microsoft pulling back today, back below 400. What about those two?
Intel was cheap about a month ago, and it's now very, very cheap. You mentioned that we may see some analyst upgrades for Intel. They've suspended the dividend. And when that happens, it's usually quite bullish because the company conserves cash. Also, Intel is a beneficiary of the new CHIPS legislation that the Biden administration has pushed through. And it's one of the great laggards in the artificial intelligence race, along with IBM. And by the way, IBM hasn't hit a record high in some 11 years. That's also very cheap. But this AI development, this whole build out of artificial intelligence and automation, that's for real, even though the stocks are soft now.
All right, turning to the Middle East, and we'll be discussing that in great detail later this hour with Middle East expert Dan RAVIV live on this program. The price of oil has come under pressure despite the big tensions in the Middle East rising, and we see oil coming under pressure due to concerns about the global economy, especially the U.S. economy. What about what's happening on that front? And also, what about recession talk here in the U.S., which is putting downward pressure on oil at the moment?
Frank, oil prices usually are pretty strong in the summer months because people do a lot of driving. And there's evidence that oil and gas prices may have peaked here in the short run. With regard to the geopolitical risks, they're quite heightened, and everybody's been anticipating some kind of retaliatory attack from Iran. It's this or next week. When that happens, we'll see what occurs. But the Iran officials say they don't want to start a world war. They just want to, they want to create some pain for the Israelis. Well, what else is new? In terms of a recession, we don't have the typical recessionary signs here. Labor Department, growth, July jobs report specifically indicates that we're softening, but it's hardly a recession. Home sales, while they're soft, it's hardly at recessionary level. And and there's every evidence that the Federal Reserve will at least have one interest rate cut in September, which is going to create a lot of political dialogues. On the right, they're going to say the Fed aided the Democrats. On the left side, the Dems, if they don't lower rates, they're going to claim that the Federal Reserve hindered a recovery. So this is a very interesting time, hence the uncertainty among consumers.
On the air live with Gabriel Wisdom with American Money Management. And Gabriel, let me ask you about the other big story that set off that tailspin on Monday, what was going on with the Japanese yen and what the central bank there was doing. And the yen has firmed against the dollar now at 146. So what do we need to know about that part of the equation, which impacted the global economy?
This is a popular hedge fund trading strategy, Frank, where large institutional funds will borrow in one currency, and that's got very, very low rates. And Japan interest rates have been near zero for some 30 years. And then they buy high yielding currencies like the dollar, like treasuries, and they keep the difference. Well, it's a great trade until it doesn't work. The Japanese finance minister, to defend the yen, started to raise rates and buy yen in the open market. Now the yen is down some 50% against the dollar. This would be a great time to go on holiday in Japan with U.S. dollars, because the yen is at I think a 38-year low now. But this unwinding of that carry trade, as it's called, borrowing in one currency and then making up the difference, with a higher yielding currency like the dollar, I think that's over for now.
So, yeah, it is the dollar that is firmed against the Japanese yen. You're absolutely right. Now at 146, $1 will get you 146.29 Japanese yen. Looks like the dollar will get you, the euro will get you 109 to the dollar at the moment. The euro is still stronger than the U.S. dollar, and we're at 127 versus the British pound sterling. So new attention on all of that, as well as the price of gold, which has been kissing record highs lately, above 2,500. What about gold here?
I think gold remains a very real asset for central banks, for sovereign nations, for institutional investors. We keep hearing about digital gold and Bitcoin, and it's true that they both have a finite supply. There's not so much gold, in the Earth's surface, and Bitcoin's blockchain is designed to slow new token creation. They had just recently had that quadrennial process known as the halving. Ultimately, there'll be some 21 million Bitcoins in circulation, but unlike gold, Bitcoin is very sensitive to the economy, to the risk on, risk off sort of sentiment. And I think gold is something to own here for the long run, clearly.
All right. We call that one analog gold, and then you got the digital gold, Bitcoin, and the other cryptos. So,
if you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it. Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Named one of the best personal finance podcasts, the Stacking Benjamin Show with Joe and his friends makes financial literacy fun.
We see money inefficiency, OG, around us all the time. We've got a few skeletons sitting out in the open, and maybe we need to broom them into the closet, if you know what I mean.
Nope, take that out.
What is...
Whatever you were going for didn't land right. Who's got a shovel and some lime?
Maybe you need to do that with your financial picture. I don't know.
Find out more by searching the Stacking Benjamins podcast wherever you listen.
So what about Ethereum? By the way, of course, most of the attention is focused on Bitcoin, but we also talk about Ethereum now that they have the Ethereum ETFs. Bitcoin hit that record high in advance of the Bitcoin ETFs. Are you following that at all?
Well, a little bit, Frank. It certainly has helped Ethereum. You know, after dropping as Bitcoin and Ethereum did, since the start of that, and that just happened in the last 4 weeks. Both are up substantially this year. I think Bitcoin is up 25 or 26% this year. That certainly outpaced gold. And the rally in Ethereum and Bitcoin is due to the launch of these exchange-traded funds where there's more demand from especially retail investors. So that's a good thing.
All right, and speaking of retail investors, let me ask you the big question here we always ask. Any specific places where you are putting money now and or taking it off the table?
You know, Frank, I've been watching the Olympics like everybody else on the planet, and you see Nike everywhere. The Summer Olympics is turning out to be a pretty good Nike publicity event, and a number of gold medals have been awarded to those wearing Nike clothing, Nike shoes, and I saw here recently that the website searches for Nike and for Puma are at all-time highs as a result of this, and they've got some 25, well, I believe it's at least 55 different shoes and 25 different products rolling out here. So Nike is a struggling brand. The stock is very, very soft. I'm starting to look at NKE.
All right, and what about NVIDIA?
I'd like to see it come down more. It's a great company, but is NVIDIA worth the current price? I mean, are these trillion-dollar valuations? Are those for real? Ordinarily, in equilibrium, we see companies trade at somewhere between 10 and 20 times their annual revenue. Well, I think NVIDIA is just too high right now for me.
Gabriel Wisdom, Managing Director at American Money Management, based here in Southern California, also author of Wisdom on Value Investing. Gabriel, it's great to have you with us. Thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank.
790 KBC welcomes Howard Jones and ABC with Haircut 100 coming to the YouTube Theater August 20th. Tickets are on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. Right now, caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. Get a pair of tickets to the show furnished by Live Nation. If you're caller 9, call right now, 1-888-790-5222. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC. We had a winner yesterday, but a loser today on Wall Street. The Dow slipping 234 points back to 38,763. The S&P 500 down 41 at 5,199. The NASDAQ down 171 at 16,196. Follow the bouncing ball this week. The Dow plunged more than 1,000 points on Monday, was up nearly 300 yesterday, and down 234 points today. The yield in the 10-year note is back up to 3.95%. The VIX index, the Wall Street Fear Index, the Volatility Index, moving up 0.5% today. Volatility Index simmering down a bit. Apple up 259 at 209 and change. Google up 65 cents at 158.94. NVIDIA, the Magnificent One, down more than $5 at 98.91 a share. And Intel, which is taking a beating lately, down 71 cents at 18.99 a share. The price of oil moving up more than $2, back to 75 and change in New York. Brent crude, the global benchmark, up more than 2 at 78.49 as tensions simmer in the Middle East. Looks like oil is slightly higher after hours, up around 75.48 a barrel in New York. The price of gold slipping today, down to $10 at the moment at $2,422 an ounce. Checking the cryptos now, we see a Bitcoin up about 400 at 55,200. Ethereum up 3 at 2,351. And Doge just shy of 10 cents Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KBC. The latest on homelessness and crime here in Southern California. San Francisco actually in focus today, with San Francisco said to bus more homeless people out of San Francisco. And guess where they're coming? To Los Angeles, among other cities in California. Sacramento and Humboldt apparently also among the top destinations for the homeless out of San Francisco. San Francisco has a program to send homeless people out of their city, and they're coming in big numbers to the Los Angeles area. In the meantime, we're watching what's happening here. While some cities are beginning to arrest homeless individuals in street encampments and clearing out the encampments, Los Angeles County has rejected that approach recently, saying it will continue using Care First outreach teams to move the homeless into housing and convince cities to take the same approach. Joining us live now to talk about this is Soledad URSUA, Venice Neighborhood Council board member. Of course, the Venice area has been hit hard by crime and homelessness. Soledad, thank you very much for coming to the line this afternoon.
Hi, thank you for having me.
All right, your reaction, first of all, to this news out of San Francisco that they're sending homeless people here to Los Angeles.
Well, if anyone is scratching their head and wondering why this is happening, the only reason why is because it just so happens that November 2024 is a mayoral election in San Francisco. And the current mayor, London Breed, she is at serious risk of losing her reelection. There's been some recent polling that has basically shown a statistical tie with her two challengers. Mark Farrell, a former supervisor, and Daniel Lurie, they are challenging her. And at this point, it's anyone's game. So what we see here is that she was one of these champions of progressive ideals, just following the same Democratic talking points, pushing all this housing first. But now, suddenly, that she is at serious risk of losing her mayoral appointment, it looks like she is now changing course, and she's getting very tough. And it's funny because San Francisco is now finally admitting what we've all known forever, is that the majority of homeless people come from out of state. And so there were some studies done. It showed that 40% of the homeless people in San Francisco were from out of state. It's probably much larger than that. So what she's done with a directive recently is to first offer homeless people bus tickets out of San Francisco before offering services. So with her job on the line, she has suddenly become a moderate. It's so funny. Any election, everybody becomes a moderate in California.
On there live with Soledad URSUA, and let me ask you this: a lot of reaction to Governor Newsom's order, ordering state agencies to address encampments, but that only impacts state land, right? And where are these people going to go? What impact, if any, will what he said recently impact the Venice area?
And, when you think about his directive as well, it's voluntary because he's not offering any funding. So it's a way for him to look tough. And look, we all know that he has political aspirations. Maybe he is hoping that, Kamala will lose and he could be the front runner in 2028. So you see, again, these far left Democrats who have ruined the state, everybody's suddenly getting moderate now. So it's just a way to kind of, remediate everything and look tough. But we know that nothing happens. And look, we know that they can move these encampments. They do this for Super Bowl, the Oscars, and when President Xi of China comes. But they always come back. So it's just these temporary fixes. And, sadly, his directive really only focuses on state property, which is largely highways. There's plenty of RVs parked on PCH right now along the highways. So they could take action, but really it has no impact on the municipalities. He's urging them to adopt his principles, basically. But then you have cities like Los Angeles where there's no major seats up for re-election, so they are not going to follow suit. Mayor Karen Bass was elected in 2022, so she's not up for re-election until 2026. So we probably will not see any change in policy direction until one of these high elected officials is really facing threat of recall or losing their seat.
All right, and let me ask you about this. In reaction to the recent Supreme Court ruling, the so-called Grants Pass decision, which now allows cities to cite or arrest people for camping, sitting, sleeping, or lying in public spaces, even if no shelter beds or other resources exist. The county, Los Angeles County, basically saying it will continue using outreach teams to move the homeless into housing and convince cities to take the same approach. They are rejecting the approach to which is basically now permitted by the Supreme Court ruling. What is happening since this ruling in the Venice area?
Nothing has happened. And most people know that this is basically the biggest excuse for elected officials to put their hands up and say there's nothing they can do. And really, it's taken so long, but everybody knew that cities and municipalities, they have the right to enforce their laws. Sure, let people sit, lay, or sleep in public access, but we all see that that's not what's happening. There's people who are building, tree houses, second-story encampments. There's people doing drugs. There's defecation in streets. There's prostitution. So it's not just sit, lay, or sleep. It's this whole other thing. But when you look at the dynamics of just Los Angeles, it really is the homeless advocates that are the loudest people out there. And so that is why the elected county officials and LA Mayor Bass, they're not willing to go to war with some of the loudest people in their base. They will likely wait until it really becomes a problem for them to actually take.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Former Navy SEAL Sean Ryan shares real stories from real people from all walks of life on The Sean Ryan Show.
Tucker Carlson, what is it that you think that people gravitate
I'm not
towards?
Self-aware. I refuse to be self-aware. I don't even look in mirrors at all, which you can probably tell from my appearance. I don't have a crazy high IQ, or I really don't have that many skills. I would say my main skill is I believe my instincts. I don't hesitate to follow my instincts, ever. To the extent that I have, I've gotten in trouble.
The Sean Ryan Show on YouTube or wherever you listen.
Measure. And when you look to what's happening in Los Angeles, we are expected to host the 2028 Olympics. When you have these high-profile events of extreme magnitude like this, there usually is a line item budget to clear out homeless encampments. So perhaps these, people who have really ridden into power on the backs of these homeless advocates, perhaps they are waiting for that to really be their, the international bailout of homelessness. Because I guarantee you that in 2028, you will see massive sweeps to basically get it out of sight and out of mind.
28, of course, is when the Olympics come to Los Angeles after the current Olympics in Paris wrap up. We're next up in 2028. So obviously Venice, one of the great tourist destinations from people around the world who want to come to Santa Monica, Venice beach area there. And what are they seeing there these days?
It is getting increasingly dangerous. What we're seeing is that the urban campers have returned. I was out traveling for a few weeks. I just ran the boardwalk last Sunday. So it's been about 3 weeks since I did that. And I'm telling you, it is just back now. So what's interesting, too, is that the homeless have learned the game. They know that they cannot have tents anymore. Because if you have a tent, LAPD or Santa Monica PD, they can come down and take down the tents. What they have done is they now have umbrellas and sleeping bags. Everything they're doing is as of right. They are following the rules. I was out there. What you see is that people have definitely been sleeping on the beach overnight. I saw some very troubling individuals. There was, these 3 guys who were doing sort of a bike chop shop, but there was this one, Latino man just with, all these tattoos all on his head. And I thought, God, this guy just came right out of prison. But what you see is that the homeless community is very adaptive. They are innovative and they're following the rules. I don't think there's much we can do now. And this is the problem every summer, right? We have amazing weather here at the beach while the rest of the country is dealing with, extreme heat. It's overcast until about noon, and then it's about 72 degrees. It's perfect weather. So California really, especially the coastal communities, have really become a safe haven for homeless across the nation. Why wouldn't you come here? You can do drugs out in the open. You can do meth and heroin. You will not go to jail. So it really has become sort of a sanctuary state for the nation's drug addicts, and we've really attracted them.
That is quite a story, and thank you for telling it like it is. And is there any visible security out there? Are the sheriffs or the police department visible out there?
No, unfortunately, there really is very little presence right now. But again, LAPD is facing historic lows when it comes to police officer staffing. There's very little they can do. Even last night, this was about 11 p.m., there was someone who was screaming belligerently, having a mental breakdown. I live, unfortunately, near the Venice Bridge home, where we have 154 people living there. There's low barriers, so people are allowed to do drugs. And, I thought about calling the police to report this, but, it hit me, the person's not doing anything wrong. If the police were to come out, this is just a quality of life issue. They're not, it sounded like a female, she wasn't breaking any laws. You can have a mental breakdown on the street. And so that is what is so sad, that we have just become so apathetic to just the suffering of this very vulnerable community because of our callous politicians. And so what we're seeing, especially in San Francisco, which had long been the mecca of progressive policies, right? They've championed these dreams of a progressive utopia, but they've seen firsthand of how it's turned into a dystopian nightmare. So what I hope is that they are actually, they've seen it first and they are reacting, because when you look at, in March of 2022, it was the San Francisco community that recalled the 3 far-left radical school board members. Then in June of 22, they recalled DA Chesaboudin, the Soros DA. And so that was really fueled by San Francisco's highly organized Asian community. So I'm hoping that LA is going to learn from that and get organized and hopefully try to follow the San Francisco model, which is quite ironic now that they have gone full moderate now.
Soledad, thank you very much for joining us live. Soledad URSUA, Venice Neighborhood Council Board member. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Military threats by Iran putting Israel on high alert today. Israeli officials have repeatedly said that Israel is prepared for a multi-front attack. An attack of that sort could lead to a wide-scale regional war, one much larger than the mostly localized Israel-Hamas conflict that started October 7th when Israel was attacked by Hamas 10 months ago. Now, as tensions rise, some in Israel have called for a preemptive strike on Iran and its proxies. According to Israeli media reports, the country's leadership would consider such a strike if it had solid evidence that Iran was planning a significant attack. This according to the Jerusalem Post. Meanwhile, an underground bunker in Jerusalem where senior leaders can remain for an extended period during a war has been prepared by the Israeli intelligence service, according to the Times of Israel. Joining us live now, Middle East expert Dan RAVIV, longtime network news correspondent, author of books on the Israeli intelligence service, including his latest book, Spies Against Armageddon, Inside Israel's Secret Wars. Dan RAVIV, thank you very much for coming to the line this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Frank. Absolute pleasure here.
Thank you very much. And give us your reaction to the latest news here, first of all.
Well, it really is a lot, but if you think about it, it hasn't changed much in the last 48 to 72 hours. Isn't that unusual? Now, last week, just to remind you, Israel acknowledged and was proud of the fact that they were able to find a very senior Hezbollah leader in Beirut, Lebanon, and with a precision strike, apparently either a drone aircraft or a missile from an airplane, they hit that apartment, they killed that man from Hezbollah. Then 6 hours later, there was, well, it looked like a similar assassination in Iran's capital, Tehran. Now, since then, there are rumors, reports, that maybe a Mossad team planted a bomb there. The man they killed was, in effect, the prime minister of Hamas. He was the political leader of the Hamas terrorist group. Ismail Haniyeh hasn't been in Gaza for years, but he would travel around the world raising money and speaking of the Hamas cause. So the Israelis don't want to acknowledge that they killed someone in Tehran, but everyone knows it was they. So Iran is, as you reported, Frank, Iran is threatening retaliation. I think they're trying to make Israel very nervous. I'm sure the Iranians are happy that many airlines, I'll say most airlines, have canceled their flights to Tel Aviv until further notice. And the lack of tourism, even since October last year, is hurting Israel. So I don't know what Iran will do. But for now, you're quite right. It's making Israel nervous.
On the air live with Dan RAVIV, Middle East expert and author of the book Spies Against Armageddon, is the latest book, Inside Israel's Secret Wars. And Dan RAVIV, now discussion about a possible preemptive strike by Israel, getting sick of all of these threats. What's the expectation there?
Well, when it comes to Hezbollah, the terrorist group in Lebanon, they're in Beirut and in the south, there's been a low-level war, as you mentioned, since October of last year. So could it get worse and bigger? Yeah, it could. Hezbollah could decide all at once to fire 1,000 rockets at northern Israel, maybe even as far as the cities of Haifa and Tel Aviv. And even the famous Iron Dome defensive system could be overwhelmed. So if the Israelis could find a way to preempt, I guess they would, but little missile launchers are all over the place. Now, as for Iran, if Israel got intelligence that Iran from a particular place was about to fire ballistic missiles at Israel, I'm sure the Israeli Air Force would try to hit it, but it's not likely to happen that way. In the middle of April, Iran actually did fire for the first time 300 rockets, missiles, and drones toward Israel, and they were knocked out of the sky by Israel, the U.S., and an instant alliance that the U.S. had set up involving Jordan and the United Arab Emirates. So it's clear that America is trying to set up that defensive shield again. That's what I think is going to happen, Frank. One of these nights, maybe even tonight, that Iran will try to hit Israel. And I bet you most of the attacking aircraft, missiles, drones, I bet most of them will be shot down.
If there is a significant attack by Iran on Israel, will Israel use the opportunity then to wipe out their nuclear facilities?
Yeah, it would be an opportunity, but it's really hard. I think it's more likely we'd see Israel trying to punish Iran. Let's say some of those Iranian missiles kill a lot of Israelis or hit Tel Aviv and kill people. Then I would expect that Israel will hit the oil exporting ports. Now, this is Mottek On Money, so think about it. Obviously, right away, the price of oil would go up. A war in the Middle East involving oil, some of it does come from Iran, of course. That would be major, even for world markets. It's not something Israel wants to do. I think that would be the first reaction. The nuclear research plants in Iran, they're buried so deep. They're really hard to get. The U.S. could do it, but Israel would have to persuade the U.S. to do it. And frankly, I think during an election campaign here, I don't think the Biden administration will do that.
Dan RAVIV, thank you very much for that thorough assessment of the current situation involving Israel and Iran. We'll keep an open line to you and look forward to your reports and analysis here. It's been an honor, of course, working with you for many years on the network news as well. And Dan, wonderful to speak with you on the air again. Thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon. Dan RAVIV, Middle East expert, former network news correspondent, author of books on the Israeli intelligence service. His latest book, Spies Against Armageddon, Inside Israel's Secret Wars. Live with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. Coming up next, we have the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang, and I'll be back tomorrow at 4. We do more at 4 every afternoon right here. Mottek On Money, 790 KBC.
When you have sports mixed with your pop culture, along with humor and celebrity interviews, your earbuds are enjoying The Rich Eisen Show.
Good to see you, Bruce Feldman, the Big 12 landscape. I just know how Dion is, where he's coming from. His wins are measured differently. The question is, as you said, it's got to go from 4 to 8.
I think they can do that. It would be hard not to get better considering how bad they were on the offensive line last year. Now, their schedule actually feels harder this year than it was last year.
Search for The Rich Eisen Show on YouTube or wherever you listen.